and hopefully you will know other places to go and get resources. That's really what I'm hoping. So very basically, what we're going to talk about is just there's a couple of things you need to know before you even get started, and then I'm going to give you 9 steps to reusing Graywater. And I've also put a key on here. So the key is important because, as I mentioned, you have to get a permit from DEQ, and places where I put a key are things that you have to actually put on that permit application. So I kind of highlighted those just so you know the things you're going to have to put on your Graywater permit application. All right. So as I've already mentioned, it is state policy to encourage Graywater reuse. The things that you need to know is, first of all, this is a reuse program. It's not a disposal program. So I've had people who have contacted me. They've got a house in the hills. They can't qualify for a septic system. They want to put in a Graywater system. I can't help you because this is a reuse program and not a disposal program. The second thing is that you have to get a permit, as I've already mentioned. We're trying to keep that permit as easy and basic to get so it's not very onerous. And then lastly is getting this permit and going through this process. We're trying to make it very, very simple, and I think that it is actually it's pretty straightforward and easy. Sometimes it's going to sound kind of complex, but I don't think that it is. It just requires that you're kind of thoughtful and you do some planning. Okay, we've already covered this. Subsurface irrigation. So on your permit application, there are 4 things under subsurface irrigation that you have to choose. And on your application, you actually have to identify which of those you're going to do. Doesn't mean a whole lot of, not a whole lot of difference if you check one and not the other. It's just we ask that you do that.
You can check more than one?
You can check more than one. Yeah, you can choose.
You have like 2 different kind of down different sides of your house?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So you can choose one or all 4 of those different ways of reusing Graywater for subsurface irrigation. Once again, the reminder, 2 inches of cover. We try to keep that very, very simple so that if you put in a system and you want to move it, you can find your hoses and you can pull them up and you can move them. That's for people who want to do like vegetable gardens and things like that. And Graywater, the 24-hour limit is something to keep in mind as well. All right, here's our key. All right, so second step. So you've determined how you want to use it. The second thing is to figure out where do you want to use it. I've kind of gone through some of these. So the site that you choose can't be subject to flooding or on-site runoff at the time that you're using your Graywater. If you're using it in the summer here, barring heavy rains like yesterday, you shouldn't have any problem reusing Graywater in the summer naturally.
Are all of these kind of requirements in the permit thing, or should we be writing this down?
All of this stuff, there was that handout which is Graywater reuse in the landscape, reusing Graywater in the landscape. Everything should be in there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, including the 9 steps.
Okay.
So it follows that very, very closely. Don't put it on steep slopes. Slopes have to be less than 45 degrees. That's pretty steep. During the irrigation system, there's the 4-foot separation. I think that was asked a little bit ago. And your soil and vegetation must accommodate your Graywater. So you just have to have an idea of how much water your plants need and make sure that that area actually can accommodate it. So we've had people talk about, they've got their little planter boxes and they want to put 100 gallons per day in it. It's like, you can't do that. So it's just kind of practical.
For the slope less than 45 degrees.
Is there a reason?
Yeah.
Yeah, the issue there is stability. Once again, this isn't irrigation. Is the focus, but there are concerns because it's subsurface and you can't tell when it gets too saturated, so it's just a slope stability issue. There are horizontal setback distances to what we call sensitive features. So if you have a well on your property, 100 feet from that, 50 feet to surface water bodies, so if you're near a stream, you bear that in mind. 100 feet to stormwater structures, again, you're just trying to keep the Graywater from getting into the stormwater systems, and 2 feet to property lines are the things that we ask. Now, you can cross property lines if you can generate Graywater here, and if your neighbor wants to reuse it, you can do that. You just have to have an agreement with your neighbor, or the other way around. If your neighbor is generating the Graywater and you want to reuse it, you can do that. You just have to have a written agreement. So, So keep a written record of your site evaluation. This is just something that says, create a map or diagram of your property, know your soils, describe your vegetation. Keep this very simple. And this is where some of the resources like soil and water conservation districts and things can be very helpful, particularly on soils, helping you know what types of soils you have. And talk to people, landscape professionals, talk to nurseries. If you're putting in new vegetation, how much water do those plants need? So in general, as a rule of thumb, lawns in the summer in Oregon need about 1 inch of water per week. And you can base how much water you need based upon that. I think I just said that. Yeah. So the next step is estimate your summer irrigation needs. Again, this is much simpler than it looks. There are a couple of ways you can do this. If you have an existing structure and you want to know how much water you need to irrigate your landscape, you can pull your water bills. And the difference between your summer and your winter water bill, you can use to calculate how much water you need for irrigation in the summer. So that's one way to do it. And the other way that you can figure out how much water you need for irrigating is to actually do a calculation based upon the area, the amount of water that's being transpired by the plants, and then there's some factors to get it into gallons per day. Again, there are people who are out there who can help you do this if it's complicated. And I think even in that guide, it talks about ways of doing this. Give some examples. It really isn't that difficult to do. Yes?
You speak about lawns, which I'm not really in favor of anyway.
Right.
But you say nothing about just keeping your lawn higher, and therefore it would use less water.
Well, that's true. No lawns, I bring up lawns only as a point of reference. And because, for instance, one of the tools that often people will use, they'll talk about how much water you need to put on your lawn. Like in the Portland metro area, they have this website you can go to, and every week you can put in your zip code, and it tells you how many inches of water you have to put on your lawn. You can use that number to calculate how much gray water you need. And that's kind of the point of using the lawn as a reference for how much water you need to put on.
I read in there that if you just collect your water in a bucket and use it that way, you don't need a permit.
If you move it inside, if you use it inside of your house, I mean that.
If you use it inside, yes, you can't take it outside.
Right. So that's the strange thing is that when the legislature passes this law, this is for taking the water outside of your house, and so we don't specify how you get it outside of your house. I mean, we assume that most people are going to run plumbing, but technically, if you have a bucket and you're taking it outside, that is permitted. All right. And so this estimate of how much gray water you need, again, I mean, this doesn't have to be precise. I mean, it needs to be kind of a ballpark. It's like we estimate that we need 70 gallons per week to water our this area in the summer. I mean, that's it. It can be pretty big numbers. General area, general numbers. Another question?
Oh, just are there any state, county, or city incentives at this point to influence people to?
No, not yet.
Are they being talked about?
There's nothing that DEQ can do on our end, unfortunately. I mean, the only mechanism we have is to deal with fees. I mean, that's it. That's all I have to play with their permit fees. And so we've tried to do that by saying we were going to waive the fee, that annual fee, in most years. So that's the way that we're trying to do that, but our hands are tied. If you're looking for incentives locally, you're going to have to talk with kind of the local jurisdiction. All right. So step 4 is estimate your available gray water. Once again, there are these 4 different sources. 2 of them are going to be really good and easy to do, showers and baths and the laundries, because they're so predictable, and you're going to know how much water you produce from those. And estimating your gray water flow is a pretty straightforward process there as well. So the idea is how much flow do you have per event, and how many times does that event occur every week? That's the way you can figure this out. So the example is 3 people are showering 5 minutes every day, and your shower flow is 2.2 gallons per minute. That's 231 gallons per week. It's a pretty basic math calculation.
What's a full bathtub?
I don't know. You'd have to figure out your bathtub. Do you know?
No, I wish I did.
All right, once again, that number does go on your permit application. Again, it's ballpark. It doesn't have to be exact, precise. And then, the next step is really, you know how much water you need to irrigate, you know how much gray water you're producing. Just look at those two numbers. In some cases, you might have extra gray water you're producing, in which case you might say, gosh, I'm gonna not collect from my bathroom sinks or something. Reduce the number of fixtures you're gonna put on your gray water system. Likewise, you might find out that you need more water than your gray water is producing. That's okay. You just need to kind of plan for supplementing it. That's where you still might use some of your potable water supply, if you need. All right, step 5. Design your gray water system. So you've got all this information, you've collected it all together. Then it's just a matter of kind of putting it down and figuring out what is it going to look like. So you know which fixtures you're going to take. You need to have some of that diversion device I talked about. You have to have some way that you can divert the gray water from your irrigation to the sewer system, assuming you're on a sewer. Where are you going to put that? Where is it going to be located in your house? You're going to have one diversion device, or you're going to have a diversion device at every fixture in your house. You can do it either way. It's really up to you to decide how you want to do that. If you have the kitchen sink, we talked about having some sort of physical treatment process, something to just think about. Where is that going to be located? Are you putting a grease trap under your kitchen sink, or are you going to put something outside of your house? Again, these are all design considerations that you need to think about if you want to do kitchen sinks. You can't store your gray water, but you may want to put in a surge tank. So maybe a 55-gallon drum so your washing machine is pumping out all this water at one point in time. It's maybe hot, so you want to slow it down. You want to let it cool before you put it out on your landscape. So you might want to put in a surge tank. You don't have to, but you may want to. So it's just something to consider. Your distribution system, the idea here is just to think about how are you going to get the water from the house out to wherever you're going to use it. Are you going to do buried pipes, or are there different ways to do that? And yes?
Just go back to the diversion device. So I've got a very small coil space, and I'd like to basically have an electrical switch so I don't have to crawl into the house and keep that space, which would be really gross. Is that doable, and any idea how much that would cost?
I don't know how much it's going to cost, but if you can control where that flow goes, as long as your ability to control it is readily acceptable, I think that's fine. The idea is in terms of the diversion devices is that it should be readily accessible. There is that thing about crawl space and you're washing dirty diapers and you need to send it to the sewer. You don't want to crawl into your house and have to switch that. So there's some way that you can do that. So system design. There's lots of things to think about, but they're pretty practical things. Document your system. So these are once again this is a requirement for getting the permit. You have to document. There are 2 documents that you have to create. I'm not going to look at them. Nobody from DEQ is going to look at them unless there's a problem, in which case we could always come to you and say, show us your documentation. But you do have to have the documentation, and the idea is this is a thoughtful process. You've planned it out. Number 1, if you've collected all of this information about your system, you've designed it, put it in something we call a system design plan. Right? That's all that it is. It's just documenting everything that you've done at this point in the process. And it's all right. The second thing you need to document is you have to have an operations and maintenance manual. And this just tells somebody how to operate the system. Where are the filters located? How often do you have to clean the filters? If sediment collects in your surge tank, do you clean it out periodically? If you're going to go away on vacation for a month and you're going to shut down your system, are there any things you have to consider there? Again, how do you operate the system? And if somebody else is going to be in your house or is going to be using your system, will they know how to use it? If there are any complexities. Once again, I'm not going to look at this, but it's something that you should have for your operation. And then step 7 is actually to apply for the permits. So the first thing you have to do if you are going to modify your plumbing, so if you've got the bucket system, you don't have to modify your plumbing, you don't have to get a plumbing permit for that. But if you're cutting into your plumbing, you have to get a plumbing permit. So that's the first thing that you have to do. And when you apply for your DEQ permit, you will have to list and just let us know that you've got that permit. That's one of the things that we're looking for. And if you didn't have one, if you're doing the bucket method, you can say not applicable in that portion of the permitted application. So the permit application, I did not bring any of these with me. Those are available online. I think the actual portion you fill out looks like this. It's fill in the blank. It's really what it's all about. One of the things we're looking for is to make sure that your application is complete. We think that these subsurface irrigation systems people want to using in their yards are a pretty low environmental risk overall. So we're really leaving it on you as a homeowner to design the systems or work with somebody who designs the systems and that they will work. So we're trying to keep this very, very simple. Step 8, once you have all of this, install the system. How you do this and who does it, that's entirely up to you. These systems can be pretty basic. One that has some sort of drip irrigation over here. Then you got somebody with a mulch basin that's around a tree. So they probably have run some graywater lines around the tree. It can be a pretty basic system. The idea here is that we're just covering it. And then last, so you've got your permits, you built your system, and operate and maintain your system. And one of the things that, when I have talked a lot with local city officials, or I talk with people who are involved with permitting on-site septic systems, they're concerned about, they tend to be the people who are most nervous about graywater systems. And the reason is that they have a lot of experience with homeowners who put in or have like a septic system and they fail to maintain it. And so the concerns that I hear from other local jurisdictions and public officials is that they're really afraid that people are going to put in graywater systems and not realize that there's maintenance involved. I think the maintenance can be pretty basic, and I just want to remind you of some of what that is. And the first one is use graywater when you need it. So the idea, if the plants need water, they look like they're wilting, give them some water. If they don't need the water, don't give them water. I mean, it's a pretty basic way of operating the system. Just basic. Don't irrigate if your soils are frozen or saturated. Basic sort of idea there. We've been through this. Avoid products that contain salt and sodium compounds. Avoid the things that are going to cause problems in the landscape. Basic ideas of maintenance. Find the biodegradable soaps or the good soaps that you can use. Don't put out the nasty stuff. If you're washing dirty laundry, somebody's sick in the house, if you're rinsing paintbrushes or something, if you're doing some things and you don't want it out in your landscape, send that to the sewer. And that's why one of the reasons there are some centralized wastewater treatment facilities. They have bigger capabilities for treating wastewater. Do not eat plants and vegetables that have come in contact with graywater. Basic stuff. And then other things about operation and maintenance. Visually check your system periodically for leaks, breaks, or other problems. Change the filters when you need to. These mulch basins, if the mulch breaks down over time, if you have a flood event, it could wash away, in the winter, it could wash away some of your mulch. Just go back and put mulch back around it. Basic sorts of maintenance ideas. Flush the system periodically if you need to. And then the last piece is, I've mentioned that one of the ways we're trying to incentivize the system or people to adopt or look at graywater is we're going to waive that $40 annual fee 4 out of 5 years. And the only trade-off is that we're going to have a fill-in-the-blank form that's going to be on our website. We're just going to ask you to fill that out and send it to us. One of the reasons that we're doing this is just to kind of give you that reminder that you do have to maintain the system over time. That's the idea.
Do you send out an annual reminder, or do people need to remember that themselves?
We will try to send out an annual reminder. So on the application, there are 2 ways. You can give us an email address or you can give us a mailing address. And you just need to specify on the application form how you want to be contacted. I would much prefer email, but if you want snail mail, you can have it. Yes.
In a property transfer situation, the new homeowner will be required to maintain the system or void it or vacate it?
Yeah, yeah. So if you sell your property, or yeah, you need to. Okay, if you're selling the property, one of the things on that declaration form is you have to declare if there's any on-site systems. Typically, we think of that as being a septic system, but technically, this is classified as an on-site wastewater system as well for kind of legal definitions. So you have to declare a graywater system on that form you fill out when you're going to sell your property. And the person who's buying the property has to make the decision if they're going to keep it or not. If they don't want the system, then they have to abandon the system. And the way that is done is, we haven't created this yet, but there'll be a way to notify DEQ that the system is being abandoned and you're removing that graywater diversion device. That's the way that you abandon the system. Once again, same resources that I had put up there before. So that's kind of an overview. I mean, I really don't think it's a complicated process. It's just a matter of going through some steps and being very thoughtful about putting in the system. Yes?
Your statement about using the water that's needed makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, my experience has been is that, I mean, we've had a wet spring. But you go outside and you dig down an inch, and you're in dry ground. And my thought would be, why would I not want to have water, say, going onto my cedar trees, redwood trees, on a year-round basis? And would there be a problem with that?
The way that the program and our rules for reuse were written is that you can distribute water into the environment when evapotranspiration exceeds precipitation, which is a fancy way of saying if rain isn't meeting the water requirements for the plants, you can put out your gray water. If rain is sufficient for watering the plants, then you can't. So the idea, so there's a lot of people who would like to put the water out year-round. And the program, and there was a lot of discomfort around doing that because ultimately that water will migrate into groundwater, and there's just been a lot of concerns. So the basic operating principle is use it when you need it. Yeah.
I'm curious, all the steps seem really straightforward except designing the system itself. Do you have like a list of local experts who can help you do that? Or?
I don't have a list of local experts who are doing that. I know that there was, unfortunately, somebody from Graywater Action was going to be here and talk, and I wish that they actually had made it. But I know Graywater Action has training classes for people on how to design and install these systems.
Is there like a way to know if a plumber has had training or has really good local examples or something like that?
Not yet.
Yeah, so maybe I can answer that because that's actually what we're starting here. So that's actually the plumbers over there. But so what we're planning to do is working with Jackson Soil and Water is actually come up with that list. And so this is new, so it's going to take a little while to get that going, but hopefully within the next 6 months or so we can have a list of these are the plumbers that have received some sort of gray water training and are familiar with the system.
And I also would say, I've been wanting to get out and see systems. People don't want to show existing systems. People don't want to show them to you because they're illegal. And it's like, well, one of the ways that that I know what's out there and what works is by people actually showing me the system. I'll take off the DEQ hat. Yes.
On that same line, you had requested that we present like systems to you. Are some of those systems that other people have submitted available to look at to get ideas?
In terms of at this
like
point,
they're submitting their system for approval to you. Is it available for us to look at some of their systems that they've set up?
so for this very basic permit, we don't take plans. I mean, all we're taking is the permit application. So you keep the plan. So I don't have copies of plans to
Or that, like, is it the second system that we had to?
Yeah, so if you do the what we call a tier 2 permit, so if you're doing treatment, then you do submit that information to us.
Is that available for others to view previously submitted forms to get ideas?
I suppose legally, yes, it is. There's not going to be an easy way to do that. I would say that probably people are going to be uncomfortable if I just sort of handing out all the information or posting it on the web. So people will be comfortable with that. So yes, you could do it through a public records request, but practically. So I'm really going to rely upon it. I mean, this is where I really want to see local people get involved. That's why I was excited about this. I mean, this is like the first time that the community has said, hey, we really want to start putting in Graywater. And so I think that your greatest resources are going to be here. And, this guy is going to help you out a lot, I think, by actually trying to facilitate this. And you're going to get examples here. You're going to know what's going to work here. People are going to know what the soils are going to be like in certain areas. I mean, it's going to work. I think it'll work here.
Well, for one thing, the San Francisco Graywater guide has some examples, and if you Google, you can actually get actually some people that have worked on this. But I wanted to stress about this man's question about putting year-round water on, how different. I live right down the hill here, and in the winter, not this year, but last year, the water table was grass level, lawn level. That's where it was during the late spring. And in the summer, it's gone. You can't find the water.
Right.
So that's the soil differentiation in Ashland alone, and because I have friends that live on Clay Street, and it's clay, and year-round they have a high water table. So it's really important to assess your local, and that means your household, right where you are.
Exactly, and that's why I've tried to put in both these presentations. You got to know your soils, you have to know your plants, you have to know your site. Yeah.
So if I was trying to get rid of more water or not put so much out in the sewer, I could just plant plants that need more water that time of year.
That plants are using the water, you can put it out. Yes.
Do any cities keep track of how much sewage flow they have, so that if there's a lot of gray water in the city, the flow to the treatment plant would diminish?
So all cities, with treatment plants have to keep track of their flow. So that's something that they are doing. There have been studies that have been done so far, that have looked at, does Graywater actually make a difference on those flows? Right now, I mean, no. I mean, it's not, because there's too few people actually putting in Graywater systems. So this, I would love to see that change.
The reason that the Conservation Commission and Division of the City of Ashland put this event on is that our hopes is that over the course of time that we can affect how much affluent we're sending out to sewage treatment and the creek on an annual basis, but there is no measurement for it on this end yet.
No, and it's going to be a while before we actually get to that point where you actually can see a difference. But I think that it's possible. I mean, I really do. I think one of the benefits of this Graywater program is that it does improve water quality at the wastewater treatment plant at that end of it. I know there's lots of people who really want to get completely off the grid and they don't even like using the wastewater treatment facilities. I appreciate that viewpoint. I really stress that I think that there's a place for both types of wastewater treatment, especially in our urban environments. So they kind of go together. Other questions?
Does the city or anywhere have a map of soil types? Just the overall.
Yeah, this is where the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation will be great resources. And so the county has got that. One of the things I would say is that often the soil maps are pretty general, and so often you have to do site-specific sorts of investigations. And when you're in a city, soil's been so disturbed that it's difficult to know what's mapped is really what's there. But really, this should be pretty simple. I mean, you can go down to the level of this is a such and such silty clay loam and it's got an infiltration rate of such and such. Yeah, that's more detailed than we're talking about. Is it a clay? Is it a loam? Is it a sand? Design your system appropriately based upon it.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I hate to cut you short, Ron, but we're going to try to switch now. The city also has a presentation